Hello and welcome. Today, Max is going rogue. Max, what are you going rogue about?
I am going rogue about Inquisitor, Rise of the Red Blade by Delilah S. Dawson. So last month, actually, I went rogue talking about Charles Soule's Darth Vader comics, and in it we got a lot of really good Inquisitor content, and so I was really excited for Inquisitor, Rise of the Red Blade by Delilah S. Dawson because it's completely unattached to anything in all of its promotions and marketing. So a lot of the Star Wars stuff that's been coming out right now, it's either like a tie-in to the new High Republic timeline, or it's like a promotion for the Star Cruiser or Galaxy's Edge, or a tie-in to a movie that's coming out. And Delilah S. Dawson's previous two Star Wars books are pretty well received by Star Wars fans. She did Black Spire, which was a promotion, basically, a tie-in to the theme park Galaxy's Edge, and she also did Phasma, which was part of the lead-up to The Last Jedi. And I didn't read Black Spire, but a lot of people really like it. I read Phasma, and I liked Phasma a lot, so I decided to read Inquisitor, Rise of the Red Blade. And it is, I'll give it my spoiler-free review first. It's amazing. I think it is my favorite Star Wars book of the current canon.
Damn, I'm going to stop listening. I want to go read it.
It's really good. It is really good, and I highly recommend it. And I specifically noted Charles Soule's Darth Vader comic series because, like I said, there's a lot of good Inquisitor content in there, and there's a lot of really good parallels between that comic series specifically and this book that I really appreciated. So if you like the comics, I highly recommend reading this book. But it is basically a deep dive into a Jedi and a Jedi's journey from falling so far from grace, from the light side to the dark side, to eventually becoming an Inquisitor, basically the exact opposite of a Jedi. And we know that there's tons of Inquisitors within this era of the Empire, and so it's really cool to get a deep dive of a character and how they kind of transform from that's Jedi all the way to the Inquisitor phase.
Yeah.
So it's really cool, and it's really well written. I will say I'm not like a huge reader, and Delilah S. Dawson's chapters are very short, which That's really
nice.
appreciate. That makes reading so much easier.
Especially as an adult person, being 30 years old now, I feel like having...
That's the first one to reach 30.
I feel like... I'm proud of it. But I feel like not having as much time anymore, just to sit down, like not in college anymore, right? Being able to sit down, having smaller chapters is viable. Because nothing pains me more than being able to having to stop halfway through a chapter, or even less than that, mark it, and then go back to read and be like, I don't even remember where I was at or what was happening. I'm randomly on this other page in the middle of a paragraph. Like, it's just so hard.
Yeah.
So smaller chapters, big thumbs up.
This is super specific, but I really hate it when books have long chapters, but within single chapters, they have like those breaks of like 5 lines of nothing.
Just new chapter.
Yeah, like that's a break. That's a natural break. Put a chapter there.
Yep. Or part 2.
Yeah, something. But no, Delilah S. Dawson's writing, it is very good. It is very detailed, and she paints a really good picture, and it is short chapters, and there's a good amount of action too. Obviously, it's a book, so there is a lot of internal development. So I'm about to get into my spoiler portion of the review now. So if you do want to go read the book, I would turn off now. But if you want to just get a synopsis, a pretty detailed synopsis, here I go. So
Luke Taylor just walked up, stood up and walked away. It's weird.
I did not. This is actually my preferred method of consuming books because I hate reading, but I would love to know the story. So I'm here for it.
Also, last thing, I've been dying to try to come up with some sort of joke about her last names because I said that the Vader comics had a lot of soul. And I'm still thinking about it because that's hilarious to me. I've been thinking about it ever since I said it.
All right, so Rise of the Red Blade by Delilah S. Dawson. So we start with a character, a Jedi Padawan by the name of Iskat Akaris, and her master, Sember Vey. Iskat is a race of unknown species. She doesn't know her home planet, and she doesn't know the name of her own species.
What? I love that already.
Yeah, it's a major plot point, too, so they get into it quite a bit. And she does not have a close relationship with her master, Sember Vey, who is very quiet and standoffish. She always kind of relegates certain training, such as her combat training, lightsaber training, to a droid. Semper Fi never trains her in any sort of combat or anything like that, and it always causes a lot of conflict between the two. So it's interesting to see that relationship between a master and a Padawan.
They're both female?
Yes.
Okay.
So Iscott travels with her master, Semper Fi, to recover Jedi and Sith artifacts to bring them back to the Jedi Temple. In the first chapter, they find a Sith book, and they bring it back after being told to come back quickly. There seems to be something going on in the galaxy. Also, in the first chapter, we get a little bit of a reference to some sort of column incident.
Do you know what era we're in?
Yes.
Was it Bine?
They make it connects the dots in the next chapter. So
I'm so impatient. I can't even let someone give me the highlights.
in chapter 2, we see one of Iscott's few friends within the Jedi Order, another Padawan, a Twi'lek, a black Twi'lek by the name of Talon.
That was one of the Inquisitors in the Charles Soule series, is it?
It is.
Oh my god.
And they are told that they are summoning as many Jedi as they can in order to go to Geonosis to rescue Obi-Wan Kenobi and his Padawan and a senator. So already it's really cool because we always joke about how we see Order 66 from a bunch of different perspectives, and Order 66 is obviously in the book, but we also get to see the Battle of Geonosis from somebody else's perspective, which is a lot of fun. So Iscott and a bunch of other Padawans and their masters go to Geonosis. It's almost immediately upon arrival, a fellow Padawan is killed. And then in the Battle of Geonosis, we see it from Iscott's point of view. She is naturally very good at combat, and even she herself is very surprised with how natural it's coming to her. And she feels a power that she hasn't felt since the column incident. Then we get backstory on this quote-unquote column incident. Apparently it was an incident where they were training, and Iscott got upset, and she accidentally pulled down a column on another Padawan, and she paralyzed her. The Padawan's name is Tika, and she left the order.
Oh my god.
Tika Waititi.
That is so dark.
Interesting.
Scott Fitzgerald. Okay, that's
It is dark, actually. You know what? I wasn't going to say this, but I'll go back. Speaking of this being a dark book, I knew from the very beginning that this book was going to be different because it starts with a note from Delilah S. Dawson saying, basically, I'm going to summarize it very poorly, but hey, just so you know, someone in this book kills themselves. And, this is a very serious thing. If anyone's struggling with mental health, there's resources. And she kind of talks a little bit about her struggle with it too in the past.
Yeah.
And it was just a really interesting note to start the book off with because it immediately put it in my head like, okay, this book is going to be pretty dark, isn't it? As well as it constantly made me think like, who's going to kill themselves?
Is it a Jedi?
Oh, we'll see.
Oh my god. I am not in an emotionally stable place enough to even listen to this book. I would have immediately put that book down. This is crazy.
And then so they get to Geonosis, and it's interesting. We see it from Iscott's perspective, and it's really fun. She's like with a bunch of other clone troopers and Jedi, and they're going in basically from the back. And she says like once she like kind of looks around and sees the arena, but like she's like off to like this side tunnel, and she says like, oh, the only thing I could see in the distance was a purple blade being ignited on some like balcony off in the distance, and then every other Jedi's lightsaber comes on, and I'm like, oh, I know that scene from my head. And
what color lightsaber does she have? Do we know yet? Does it come up?
Green.
Hell yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's green.
I love
Is it red later?
It is red later.
Rise of the Red Blade.
While at Geonosis, unfortunately, Iscott Akaris's master, Semper Fi, dies to a Geonosian.
Oh, good. We didn't like her anyway. That's okay. To a Geonosian, that sucks. That's an unflattering death.
When she was dying, Iscott was able to run over to her, and Semper Fi communicated cryptic last words apologizing to Feyre, saying that she is like you and that she has done all she could. And so as she's dying, Scott's asking her like, who's Feyre? What are you talking about right now? And she's just saying like, oh, I did the best I could with her. She's just like you. I'm sorry. And so she is led to believe she knows nothing of her family, of her own species, her home planet, or anything like that. So she gets it in her head that this Feyre must be her mother. And then she leaves Geonosis, but she's rightfully, kind of traumatized by everything that happens. Back on Coruscant, she is cleaning out Semper Fi's belongings, and she finds a lightsaber with a yellow blade, Luke.
Ew.
And it has an extra wide hilt like one that is customized for her species because her species has extra long fingers, and so Iskat's lightsaber blade is extra thick to accommodate for that.
Husky.
She got extra
Husky.
long fingers. Is she like a larger than humanoid alien, or just big fingers?
She's from the description I've read, she was very humanoid, a lot of human characteristics. The only difference is she has red skin, very long fingers, and like very dark black hair.
Long fingers is a unique character
It is.
trait.
It is. Because everything else is basically just human with red skin. So
Imagine the door handles.
Matt's only thinking about the realty. Back at Coruscant, after she cleans out Semberve's belongings and finds the lightsaber, they hold a funeral for all the Jedi. Immediately, Iskat goes to the archives and tries to research Feyre and sees if she can find anything maybe previously in the Order. During this time, she is called to a kind of an emergency ceremony where she is knighted by Jedi Mace. Excuse me. She is knighted as a Jedi by Mace Windu. And then we get some interesting insight into the knighting ceremony. Mace Windu cuts off their Padawan braids or chains in lieu of a braid if they don't have hair. And this is also the time where Anakin was knighted as a Jedi Knight. And we learn that they lifted the Jedi trials as a wartime measure. So they basically just took a bunch of Padawans and made them Jedi Knights because they kind of had to.
Yes, we just talked about this not that long ago about about the Empire and how they presumably had to do that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, with Admiral Ozzel.
So
Yes, actually.
So Iskat continues to struggle with this. She felt very natural when she was fighting. She felt like the Force was like really speaking to her during that time, and she doesn't have a master, so she's trying to figure out more about herself, more about her training, where she should go. And so some Jedi try reaching out to her. One of whom is Jocasta Nu, the librarian of the Jedi Archives,
Oh,
and
she got some new content lately.
yeah. Because it's all crossover with the Charles Soule comic books. So Jocasta Nu offers her a position in the Jedi Archives, but Iskat turns it down. She feels that the Jedi are trying to relegate her to something that is not suited for her because they don't want her to find out more about her natural abilities and the powers that she is naturally gifted at. She is eventually given new robes. She finds a garden at the Jedi Temple where she meditates. She meets a droid tech named Hizo, who's part of the temple staff, and he tells her that there are hidden parts of the temple having to do with the dark side. Iskat is later sent on a mission with another Jedi named Josk Navar and Towlin, her Twi'lek Jedi friend. Iskat senses a little anger from Towlin when Josk is rude to him, which is an important plot point for the future. They then go to a planet called Thule, where they are sent to shut down a droid factory. While on Thule, they find a cave with a Sith altar. Once again, Iskat feels the Force calling to her from the Sith altar. They sleep in this cave, during which Iskat opens up to Towlin, and she has a dream of a girl that she suspects to be Feyre. The next morning, they climb a canyon to get to the factory. Josk tries to connect with Iskat, which Iskat doesn't really appreciate. I don't know. It was kind of weird. But I think it was just to kind of humanize Josk a little bit because he immediately dies. He accidentally, they're climbing this canyon, and in doing so, Josk accidentally pierces a slug on the wall, and a flock of birds come out pecking at his face, and he causes him to fall back off the canyon, and he falls to his death.
Oh, so many unceremonious deaths for Jedi.
Well, and it's notable, too, because, like, as they later have to report this back to the Jedi Temple, everyone's like, a Jedi died by falling? Like, Jedi don't really die by falling. What happened? And they do, like, a whole investigation, and they believe that he was, like, the birds that were, like, pecking at him were venomous and something, and that he was dead before he ever even hit the ground. So Josk is dead, but Iskat and Towlin proceed to the droid factory and encounter heavier than expected resistance. Most clones die that were accompanying the Jedi on this mission, but Iskat is able to destroy the droid factory. She goes back to Coruscant, she reports what happened with Josk Navar, and she gets into an argument with Yoda and Adigalia about blowing up the factory. Apparently there were citizens that died in the explosion that Iskat did not know about because they were operating under limited intel. She did not know anything about these other people, and she was just told that they had to shut down the factory, and she decided to blow it up. Apparently they didn't want to blow it up. They just wanted it shut down, a little more surgically. So she gets into a pretty big disagreement with Yoda and Adi Gallia about it. She's frustrated. She later talks to her friend Hizo in the meditation garden. The friend mentions other Jedi who have left the Order to pursue their Force gifts. He also remembers a Jedi roughly 20 years ago who looked like Iskat. And if you don't get it by this point, I'm moving on to chapter 19 now. Hizo is a shady character.
Hizo's the droid, isn't he?
He's the droid tech. He works on droids.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I even thought it was like H1Z0. Okay.
Give
No.
the working class a bad name over here.
Back at the temple, Iskat is given a job to help train younglings on Coruscant. She does this for a while, but later decides with Hizo's encouraging that she will also follow her own path. Iskat begins keeping her head low and secretly trains at night, specifically in combat and using lightsaber. She is finally given another mission with Towlin, who has been ignoring her since the last mission, and a clone named Spider. During this mission, Iskat rebonds with Towlin on the ship ride to Olgathon 3, where they are sent to extract a slicer. They go to Olgathon 3. They are threatened by it's basically an abandoned moon except for one person who occupies it, so you're led to believe that it's the slicer. But they were threatened upon entry that they're going to be blown up if they try to land. And so Iskat once again kind of defies orders because Towlin was supposed to take the lead on this mission, and she just comes out and she just tells the slicer the truth as to why they're there. And the slicer agrees. So Iskat's plan worked, but she kind of went around Talon's head. She once again defied orders. And they go to Olgathon 3 to pick up the slicer. And the slicer, kind of in passing, mentions something about the Picorian. And the Picorian was referring to Iskat. So she learns about her home planet, a planet called Picori. And very little is known about Picori. She brings the slicer home and asks Mace Windu for time away from the Order so that she can try to visit this home planet that she just recently learned about. But she is denied access to leave, saying that they are short-staffed,
Jesus.
as is.
Taco Bell?
There's a war going on, and they basically need everyone around,
No
and
PTO.
they can't afford to have anyone, not around that's not on official Jedi business.
Is Mace is one of the denying?
Mm-hmm.
He is the bearer of bad news in every single
He is
single
the
thing he
worst.
does. Yeah.
So then she once again goes to the meditation garden. She has another shady conversation with Hizo about being who she truly wants to be. Later on, Iskat and Towlin and another Jedi get sent on a mission to go to a planet to look for General Grievous. And then at the end of this chapter is when the clones suddenly and unannounced betray this random Jedi. And we are led to believe that Order 66 has just occurred.
But they don't betray Towlin and Iskat?
Not right away. So Order 66 is executed, but before the clones can kill Iskat, she gets a message from a hooded figure from the clones asking if she's still willing to follow her passion and forge her own path and learn about her mother, Phara, and how she died because of the Jedi Order. She says yes and leaves Towlin behind to die. She is immediately imprisoned on her way to Coruscant, but eventually meets the Grand Inquisitor, who offers her a spot within the Inquisitorius.
Cool.
As a type of initiation or test, she fights the Grand Inquisitor, but is easily beat. And then she later goes on a mission with the Grand Inquisitor to another artifact dealer, playing on Iskat's previous role with her master, who is researching and hunting down Jedi and Sith artifacts. They go to a dealer that they have worked with before. Iskat tells him what they're looking for. He basically says he has it, but then he locks himself in the back room. He did not want to turn it over, and Iskat kills this person through the door and robs him of his artifacts. Among them is a Sith holocron that she brings back to the temple with the Grand Inquisitor. Back on Coruscant, Iskat is made a full-fledged Inquisitor and given access to their library. She later spars with the Seventh Sister, who uses the Force. Iskat uses the Force to snap Seventh Sister's fingers, and it is brutal.
Yikes.
And
She must have not had those extra long fingers like Iskat.
no, Iskat's got those long girls.
I keep thinking about that. Every time I picture Iskat, her fingers get a little bit longer.
It's a major quality trait. Seventh Sister later ambushes Iskat in her sleep for revenge, stabbing her. Luckily, Iscott has 2 hearts, so she is able to
Classic.
kind of drag herself to a bacta tank and recover.
Wow.
That's another, I guess, important species trait. She also has 2 hearts. They mention that frequently as well. Later on, she finds Hizo in the temple, still around. Apparently, he is cool with the Inquisitors because he was reporting the whole time on his conversations to the Grand Inquisitor, which Iscott did not take kindly to, and cuts Hizo down in cold blood.
Yikes.
She continues to train and spar with the other Inquisitors and even with Darth Vader. There's a very interesting battle that breaks out where she is able to... She basically still loses, and Darth Vader has to, like, run away, but she doesn't lose a limb. And everyone was, like, amazed that was, like, the best anyone's ever done against Darth Vader, was not actually lose a limb.
That's awesome.
Because there's another scene where we see some of the Jedi coming out of the sparring room with an eye gouged out and another one with an arm who just got cut off.
Jesus.
And again, this ties in directly with the Charles Soule comics because it is the same Inquisitors who lose an eye and an arm in the Charles Soule comic books. So it's really cool. Eventually, she asks the Grand Inquisitor if she can go visit Picori, and the Grand Inquisitor basically gives her permission, saying, you know, this is the dark side. We're allowed to follow our passions and all that kind of stuff. So he grants her access. She goes to Picori and she meets her grandmother, and she gets background on her mother, that she too was force sensitive and she was given over to the Jedi Order as a child, and she was given her mother's Padawan braid. She eventually leaves Picori to go back to Coruscant, where she runs into Towlin, who was suspected to be left for dead previously. Towlin talks about how he was betrayed by the clones and he was shot numerous times, but his will for revenge against Iscott has basically left him alive because he was very upset at Iscott for leaving him for dead.
Understandable.
So Towlin and Iscott duel, and we basically see that Towlin has fallen even deeper to the dark side than Iscott has. Ultimately, Iscott loses, and she is once again stabbed in the chest by Towlin. Again, she gets in the back of the tank, heals up, she's fine.
Good.
She later gets sent on another mission to hunt down 2 Jedi, of which Towlin is also sent. On the planet, Iscott infiltrates a castle to, it's like a castle belonging to like a Jedi artifact collector / hunter. This is somebody who was like basically dealing in like the slave trade of Jedi, which is interesting. So she breaks into this castle and she locates a Jedi in the dungeons. And the Jedi that she finds in the dungeons is a Padawan that she knew from the Order, whose name was Charlin. And Iscott and Charlin never got along. Ever since the column incident, Charlin always made snarky comments behind her back, saying that she didn't like Iscott and she didn't trust her.
Oh, I bet she regrets that now.
Oh, she did. She made short work of her. She basically cuts her down in cold blood as well. No, I'm sorry. She first chokes her to death.
Oh, good. Much more humane.
Yeah.
And then later on in the dungeons, she finds her master, Clefen Opus, who is another Jedi that Iscott had previous history with, because after Sember Vay died, Clefen Opus volunteered to help train Iscott in lightsaber combat, which Iscott was always naturally more inclined to. So she appreciated that. However, she always felt that Clefen Opus was hiding back from her. And one day when she finally beat Clefen Opus in like a sparring combat, he kind of whipped out this move that she had never seen before in order to basically flip the tables, and he beat her. And that always struck a nerve with her because, again, she felt like the Jedi were always holding something back. They always knew something that they were never telling her. So she once again battles Clefen Opus, this time to the death, where she eventually is successful. She kills Clefen Opus, but first Clefen Opus tells her about her mother. So we get backstory that her mother was in fact force sensitive, came to the Jedi Order, and failed the Jedi trials, and she left the Order, and she is the one who killed herself. She was the one who went back.
Mom?
Her mother?
Mom, yeah. Her mom killed herself, and Iscott blamed the Jedi for it.
Okay.
So all of this has basically solidified her belief that the dark side is the way to go.
Yeah.
The Jedi never knew what they were talking about. They're a bunch of liars, hypocrites. They kept all this information from me. This is what I'm meant to do.
That's cool. We never see anyone fail the Jedi trials.
Let's see what else happens.
We don't have to talk about that.
She finally, yeah, it is cool. I mean, we don't. The
They always
information
talk
is
about it.
fairly
They make it seem like
limited.
it's a really strenuous thing, but you know, the only times we ever really hear about it is Obi-Wan says he's ready for the trials, and it doesn't seem to be a problem. From the beginning of this book, they kind of waived the trials for a bunch of other people. The High Republic, they have the trials once or twice, and yeah, it's neat seeing someone fail and the consequences of it.
And they mentioned it a couple times. So Hizo, he's also force sensitive, and he also failed the Jedi trials. But when he failed, they offered him a job basically at the temple, and he accepted it. They also offered Scott's mother, Feyre, a position, but she declined and
Hizo went
off
from
to do her own thing.
Jedi apprentice to mechanic? That freaking sucks. No wonder he's a
Well,
scumbag.
yeah, that's why he was
I'd be furious also.
working with the Grand Inquisitor. So when she was made a full-fledged Inquisitor, she talks about how she was finally given a new name, but she never felt ready to claim that new name that she has been given from the Inquisitorius until the end, when she finally cuts down the 2 Jedi in cold blood. She finally assumes her rightful place.
I'm sorry, what 2 Jedi that she cut down?
Charlin and Cleophanopus.
Oh, okay, not the same. Those 2 incidents, okay.
Yeah. And so she finally kind of took her position within the Inquisitorius and accepted her title as 13th Sister, which is, to me, significant because this whole time during this book, I kept thinking, I wonder if this is the same Inquisitor, the same 2 Inquisitors who fell in love in those Charles Soule comic books that Darth Vader sensed and later killed. But then I was like, I doubt they're doing that because that's like such an obscure tie-in to basically be like, oh, you know those Inquisitors from that 2 comic books? I'm going to do an entire backstory on that.
Yeah.
And the only reason that I thought that it might have been was because Towlin is a Black Twi'lek, and I've never seen a Black Twi'lek other than that Inquisitor.
Yeah.
But when she said, I am the 13th sister, the 13th sister's name is mentioned in those Charles Soule's comics. And so as soon as they said that, I was like, son of a bitch, this is the same Inquisitors.
It is those 2?
Yes.
That's
This whole book is a tie-in to those 2 comic books by Charles
man.
Soule.
This is
The
perfect
2
for your Rogue
Inquisitors.
Ones. That was the best part of your Charles Soule Rogue One, too.
I know.
About those 2
And
Inquisitors.
I just talked about it last month, and now, and that's why I felt like this book like spoke to me so personally, because I just went back and I just reread those comics, and now I'm getting this, which I had no idea was basically just a huge tie-in to that specific story.
So it does have a lot of soul in it.
Oh, it's got so much heart and soul, Matthew. It's great. And the epilogue is basically just a novelization of those 2 comics from Iskat's perspective.
It's very
What?
cool.
It's over?
That's it.
Oh, man.
She fell to the dark side. Well, and spoiler
And then
alert.
she dies in the Charles Soule comics?
In the Charles Soule comic, Darth Vader senses a relationship between Towlin and Iskat, which is there. Darth Vader is about to strike down Iskat. Towlin saves her, and in that moment, it is confirmed by Darth Vader. He's like, "Yeah, you 2 have something going on." And then they ran away. There's a whole chase, like throughout Coruscant, basically,
Right.
where Darth Vader hunts them down, and he does eventually kill them by
When
using the
do-
Force to have them stab each other, basically.
When do Iskat and Towlin develop this relationship? Not in the book?
It's like kind of slowly evolves, but it's mostly in the epilogue.
Wow.
Yeah, or I should say
That was
it's like
a,
hinted
that
at
was a
throughout the
roller
book.
coaster.
It was
I-
a roller coaster.
It is. It's really good. And
I love that. You should read all my books for me.
I skimmed. What I said in the epilogue was basically just that second comic. Remember that first comic? They were on that mission to steal Eth Koth's new baby. Those are the 2.
Were they going to raise a child together?
No, they were sent by the Inquisitors. They
Oh,
turned
right,
it over
right,
to like
right.
a nursing droid or something with
Yeah.
the Inquisitorius. So it gives a lot more depth to the story because in it, Iskat and Towlin go to this planet because they know that Eth Koth is there and that Eth Koth just have a child. Darth Vader fights Eth Koth and kills him, but the Inquisitors take the baby from its mother. And
Right.
the epilogue is really good because it kind of talks about that internal dialogue that she's having where instead of feeling guilt, Iskat feels like she's saving this baby because she knows that this baby is basically going to be raised in the dark side and it's going to be like shown its full potential and it's not going to be like hiding her gifts like her mother would likely be.
Man.
So she steals the baby from its mother, hands it over to the Inquisitorius, and then the next comic book is the one where they get in the chase with Darth Vader, and Darth Vader eventually catches up with them and has them kill each other.
That's brutal.
Were you just like foaming at the mouth when you were reading this book, thinking about how it's going to be your next Rogue One? This is just too perfect.
I know.
This is insane.
I literally just reviewed those comic books last month.
We need. Yeah, this is like instead of a Rogue One, it's also like Max Taylor Spark Notes.
Yeah, I'm here for it. I loved it.
But yeah,
because I wanted to read this book, but I do not have the time or patience to actually read. This was great. Thank you for this.
It's really good. I still recommend reading it because it is really well written, and unfortunately, it's really hard to give plot notes on like a lot of the internal strife and a lot of like struggles that Iscott goes through, because obviously a lot of it is internal, like going from the light side to the dark. Everything I said was mostly just like the actual like physical plot points.
Sure.
But it's a novel, so obviously there is a lot of internal struggle, and all of that is really good as well. But yeah, it was really good. I give it a 9 out of 10. I think it was fantastic. It tied into the comics, which I absolutely love. The only thing about the book upon reflection that didn't quite make sense to me was why Iscott's mother would have given her over to the Jedi Order.
If she had already had a bad experience.
Yeah. I feel like that's weird. And they do kind of address it, but
that's a whole can of worms. Like, why would any parent give their child over to the Jedi Order?
yeah.
I mean, you're a parent.
Yeah.
Would you?
No.
Me neither.
No. But yeah, I mean they
I really like the Jedi, but I'm not giving them my son.
Yeah. No, obviously they address it. I mean, that's basically what a lot of the book is about. But finding herself, I should say, because since she was turned over as a youngling, like I said, she didn't know anything about herself. No one would tell her what planet she was even from.
That brings up another thing that I've always thought about with Star Wars is the individuality of the Jedi in the Order, even though they're given over as babies, and the whole nurture versus nature thing. Like, what does she care about her home planet? I guess that gets into a whole bunch of real world, much more serious stuff that I don't really feel qualified to talk about, like adoption and immigrants and stuff that I'd rather you cut just entirely.
But no, in addition to like those big questions as well, individuality within the Jedi Order is a big theme throughout the book, because Iscott is constantly being told by the Jedi, like, oh, like suppress those feelings, basically, don't worry about where you're from, you're a Jedi now, that's all that matters. But the other thing, other than individuality among the Jedi, the other big theme that they kept talking about was death. And again, that just kind of leads to how dark the book is, because obviously a lot of Jedi died during this period of the Clone Wars, and it never sits well with Iscott, because during all the Jedi funerals, it basically ends with them saying, like, give praise basically for so-and-so is now one with the Force. And she's like, no, like this isn't, death is not something that should be praised. Like, it's something that should be mourned. Like, I want to mourn the Jedi. And basically everyone just keeps telling her, like, oh no, don't have attachments, don't mourn them, be thankful that they're one with the Force. And Cleef and Opus was one of the ones who told her that. So when she does kill him in the dungeon, when she's like leaving his body behind, she says something to the effect of like, be glad you're now one with the Force.
Ooh, wow.
Brutal.
Yeah, that's a lot of heavy topics.
It is. It's a heavy book, and it's a dark book, and it was so good. And I cannot believe that the whole thing was a tie-in to these comic books.
I can't believe that either. That is insane.
Yeah. Because I was getting so giddy when they were talking about these Inquisitors, like getting limbs cut off and eyes gouged and everything. I was like, oh my gosh, I've seen that. Like, that's such good like continuity. And it was even better than I expected.
Nice.
And then I immediately went back and reread those two comics as well, because I was able to look at pictures of Iscott, and I was like, oh yeah, that's what she looks like. Which is basically just
Is she
red.
unmasked in the comics?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man.
Yeah, look her up.
Gotta go back.
That's too perfect. This
Yeah.
makes me want to reread the Darth Bane series. Have you read those?
I have not.
That's another one that's a lot of good dark side stuff with very heavy and dark themes and events.
That's Legends, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
I haven't read anything in Legends.
It's Legends, but not confirmed uncanon Legends, because it's a different time period. It's not like
Sure.
Legends Luke Skywalker.
It's not
you know?
inconsistent with anything.
Right.
But
And
yeah.
Darth Bane is canon, and his story is just fleshed out there, and it's not technically canon yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if one day they canonize it.
Yeah. But anyway, that is my review of Inquisitor: Rise of the Red Blade. I give it a 9 out of 10. If you've listened this long, then you know exactly what happens in the book, but I still highly recommend it. Like I said, Delilah S. Dawson is a fantastic author, and I really hope that they give her more projects in the future.
Sweet. See you, Sammy. Do I do that during
I was waiting for you to do it. I figured you would.
All right. See you, Samuel.
G'day, folks.